Alhamdulillah wahda wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da. Inshallah, in our series Creed of the Rightly Guided, we will be doing the next aqidah, and that is ever living who never dies and the all sustaining who never sleeps. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever living who never dies and the all sustaining who never sleeps. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm. Surah Baqarah verse 255, that Allah, who is He? There is no God but He, the living, the all sustaining, neither dozing overtakes Him nor sleep. So the first point here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all ever living. What does that mean? Hayy, it has different meanings. One of the common meanings, or one meaning we can take, is that Hayy means everything is completely depends on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single thing, right? He is alive. What does it mean by He is alive? Means that His life is the foundation of every single thing else. Everything in the universe that we see, whether we don't see, we understand, we do not understand, any possibility, any occurrence that's there, it is completely depend on this sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is al-hayy. Number two is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qayyum, which is everything is dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sustenance. Qayyum is someone who is not just independent of creation, he is also the one that the creation is dependent on him for sustenance. He is the foundation. If it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being qayyum, then there will be no sustenance. So we are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attribute of being qayyum for sustenance of others. And number three, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need rest. A thought can come, someone who's been living, ever living, someone who is sustaining the entire universe and maintaining the affairs of the universe. It's exhausting, right? I mean, we go to work, we come back home, we get tired. We go to school, we come back home, we get tired. We do a little bit of work, we get tired, we need rest. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that He does not need sleep. He does not even need to rest. If He does not even need rest, you can imagine there is no possibility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any form having any death, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sleep is a sister of death. If He doesn't, and dozing, it's the cousin of sleep, for example. So if He doesn't need to doze, He doesn't need any rest, He doesn't need to sleep, He doesn't need to sleep, obviously He is not going to die, because the moment we imagine a moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dozes off, everything will be destroyed. Why? Because Allah is Hayy. Every life, everything is dependent on this sifat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Qayyum. All sustenance is dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes for a rest, then the foundation of the universe is missing. It's not in work. It's like a machine, right? If we go to a factory and then we have the machine constantly running, and packaging machines or whatever work they've been programmed to do, if it's turned off even for a minute, for that minute no product will come out. It's for a minute, but for that 1 minute no product will come out. Why? Because the machine is turned off. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to, na'udhu billah, we can't even imagine, but to understand this, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to, someone believes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala went to rest, then the entire universe will collapse, because it is totally dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, there is no example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but just for our understanding. There is no example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but just for our understanding, because we are restricted. We cannot think beyond beyond ourselves, right? So just for our understanding, if there was a factory, and in that factory there's a machine and constantly producing products, if that machine was turned off, for that moment there will be no product. Similarly, the entire universe is completely dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes for a rest even for a moment, the entire system will collapse. Questions sometimes come. It's a simple question, but it does come, and that is that how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being ever living and all sustaining different from other creations? Usually the question is posed in the sense that we are alive, Allah's alive, okay. I sustain my family, Allah sustains the creation. Okay, so there's nothing special. So the point usually comes is there's nothing special. I can sustain my family. I am alive, other creatures are alive. So how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala different? We have talked about this before in previous, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qualities are perfect and they're different. Right? We do not resemble Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It tells us that, yes, there are certain things we do, but they are not the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qualities are perfect. Right? For example, I am alive. Yes, there was a time I was not alive, and there will be a time I will not be alive. Do I sustain my family? Yes, but I'm restricted to the sustenance I give. I only maybe go to work, get paid, and then bring groceries to the house. That's about it. But when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sustaining as a qayyum, is not restricted to just bringing food to the table. It's the entire system of the universe, right? Entire universe depends on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, maybe I'm doing small jobs here and there, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sustaining the entire universe, and there's no comparison of that. It's like saying, there's a king of, let's just say there's a place and he has a king, and I have a house and I take care of my family, and I go tell the king, hey, you're no special. I also, I am also the caretaker of my family. You are a caretaker of your kingdom. We're no different. I should be sitting next to you on your throne. I mean, anyone would understand, no, that's not a comparison. Yes, you are similar in the sense that you are the caretaker of your family, and the king is the caretaker of the kingdom. But just because you are a caretaker and he's a caretaker doesn't make you equal, right? So same thing here. Yes, it does seem so that we are similar. I am alive, Allah's alive. I am sustaining, Allah sustains. But it is not same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being hayy is not just him being alive. Every single thing else is dependent on that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qayyum doesn't mean like I sustain. It means the universe is completely dependent on the foundation, you can say, in a sense, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the summary would be, number one is all life and sustenance depends on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need any rest. He does not get tired. He doesn't need to doze off, or he doesn't doze off. He doesn't sleep, and he never dies. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to have the correct understanding, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to convey the true message of Islam. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.